The tale of the Odyssey is considered the second part of Homer's epic poem, the Iliad, and it is believed to have been written at the end of the 8th century BCE. While the Iliad is about the Trojan War, the Odyssey is about one man's struggle to return home to his wife and son. And today, we'll be telling you that story. For 10 years, the Trojan War raged on, and when the conflict finally ended, the only thing that the king of Ithaca, Odysseus, wanted was to return home to his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus. Gathering his men and his ship, Odysseus set out for Ithaca. But a great storm descended upon them, and their ships had been blown off course. For 9 days, those ships were blown throughout the seas. And finally, when the winds calmed, Odysseus discovered the land of the Lotus Eaters. Now, Greek historians believe that the land of the Lotus Eaters is the island of Zerba, off the coast of Tunisia. Seeing this island, Odysseus and his men landed to bring on water and make repairs. After they had eaten, 3 men were sent off to see who, if anyone, resided on this island. Here they met the Lotus Eaters, a people that lived entirely off the lotus plant. The Lotus Eaters seemed a peaceful sort, with very little care of the world. And when offered some of the lotus plant to eat, the men gladly accepted it. The fruit was delicious. But after eating it, their concerns and worries seemed to leave their minds, and thoughts of returning home no longer bothered them. They merely seemed to want to stay and eat with the Lotus Eaters, carefree and peacefully. Odysseus, refusing to leave the men that he had fought alongside for 10 years, dragged them back to the ship. He knew that it was the fruit that had changed their thoughts and the feelings of his men. Tying them to the ship, he ordered the rest of his men to return at once and not partake in the fruit of the island. His men, accustomed to following their king's orders, immediately disembarked from the island and smote the gray sea with their oars. The ships traveled for some time, finally having to stop once again, and they stopped on an unknown island near the land of the Cyclops. Exploring that island, they found a cave that held cheese and meat, and they began to eat all they could. Yet cheese and meat did not simply grow in caves, and they had stumbled into the home of the Cyclops, Polyphemus. Understandably upset by these men eating all of his food, Polyphemus sealed the entrance to the cave and began to eat the intruders. Cyclops are not known for their intelligence, however, and Odysseus stepped out, introducing himself as nobody and offering the creature wine. Once intoxicated, the hero blinded the Cyclops, causing him to scream out in pain. The cries brought the aid of the other Cyclops, who could not enter the cave because of the boulder that Polyphemus had placed at the entrance. When asked who attacked him, Polyphemus told them that nobody had attacked him. And since nobody attacked him, the other Cyclops shrugged, and they walked off, back to whatever Cyclops do. Now blind, Polyphemus had no way of finding Odysseus and his men, and eventually, he had to remove the boulder to release his sheep out of the cave so that they could eat. Seeing their opportunity, Odysseus instructed his men to cling to the underside of the sheep, gripping their wool so that they could sneak outside. Before leaving, Odysseus made the mistake of taunting the Cyclops for how easy it was to trick him. Now unknown to Odysseus, Polyphemus was the son of Poseidon, the god of the sea. Regardless of how awful the gods have treated their own children, they do not take kindly to mere mortals mistreating them. For his actions, Poseidon cursed Odysseus to not see his home for another 10 years. So after their escape, the men traveled to the island of Aeolia, ruled by King Aeolus, a mortal king who had been gifted by the gods to be the keeper of the winds. A fellow king, Aeolus, gifted Odysseus a leather bag containing all of the winds of earth, wishing him a speedy journey home. Unknown to them, the bag did not actually contain the west winds, the one direction that would ensure a swift travel. Setting sail once more, the crew travels onward, finally coming within sight of Ithaca. That night, though, Odysseus sleeps, dreaming of his wife and son. His men, believing that the leather bag from the king must have contained gold and jewels, opened it up, and Poseidon's curse was enacted, with the winds beginning to howl, becoming a giant storm, blowing the ship back the way they had come. The men returned to the king, who Odysseus pleaded with for further help. But seeing that he was cursed by the gods, the king refused, lest he incur such wrath. Yet the men were determined to reach home and set forth once again. And that's when they arrived at the island of Lamos. Entering the harbor, the men saw the city of Telepylus. Piloting their ships into the harbor, Odysseus' men lashed them together so that they would not drift apart. Odysseus kept his own ship outside of the harbor where he tied it to some rocks. And climbing those rocks, he could see nothing but smoke from the city. Needing more information, he sent 3 of his men to gather information about the locals. While traveling along the road, the men came upon a woman who told them that she was the daughter of King Antiphates. Taking her direction, the men traveled to speak with that king, and arriving at his home, they were greeted by a female giant who was the wife of Antiphates. It turns out that the island is inhabited by a race of cannibalistic giants, Antiphates' wife called for her husband, who arrived and immediately ate one of the men. The other two escaped, but they were chased by these giants, thousands of them following them as they made their way back to the ships. From the cliffside surrounding the harbor, the giants then threw massive rocks, shattering the ships to splinters. The men that did not drown, they were speared to death. From his vantage point, Odysseus looked on, helpless to come to the aid of his men, and he returned to his ship, still tied up outside of the harbor, and with his remaining men, made his escape. Now down to only a ship and a handful of men to work with, Odysseus came upon a mysterious island, which no known scholars were able to find the exact location of. This island is the home of the Witch Circe. Exploring her island, the men discover a clearing in the center of a thick forest. Within the clearing stands Circe's mansion, around which a menagerie of strangely calm animals roamed. As the men approached, lions and wolves came forward, nuzzling against them. Circe came out offering the men lodging and food, and they gladly accepted. So she set before them a massive feast of cheese and wine. Yet Circe had laced all of that food with a magic potion that will transform the men into beasts, just like the ones that roamed about the mansion. One of Odysseus' men, who was suspicious of the witch from the beginning, declined any food, and once he saw what happened to the others, he slipped away to warn Odysseus about what had happened. Readying his remaining men, Odysseus set out for the witch's home, and along the way he was stopped with a warning by the messenger of the gods, Hermes. Hermes brought word from Athena, who told him to use the Mali herb to defend himself against Circe's magic. Taking the advice of the gods, Odysseus allowed Circe to try the same trick on him. But when her magics failed, he drew his sword and demanded that she release his men. So impressed with the warrior, she offered him a place in her bed. Hermes had warned against this too, however, that the witch would try this to take his, manhood. So Odysseus had her swear to all of the gods on Mount Olympus that she would do no further harm to him or his men. Apparently, Odysseus wasn't in a huge rush to get home and had forgotten all about the men being turned into animals, because it was a full year that they remained on that island, eating and drinking. Circe became his lover for a time. When they finally decided to set sail once more, despite her love taking leave, Circe did offer them advice for the rest of their journey. There were two routes that Odysseus could take on his way home to Ithaca, either through Planctia, a place known as the Wandering Rocks, where the seas were incredibly violent, or passing between two sea monsters, Charybdis and Scylla, which was known as the Strait of Messina. Thinking on Circe's advice, the crew set sail once again. Seeking further guidance, Odysseus made a sacrifice, wishing to gain knowledge from the dead, and a former crew member was the first to speak, asking that his captain bury his body. Odysseus promised that he would, and a prophet of Apollo offered advice on appeasing Poseidon once they returned home, telling them that should they eat the sacred livestock on the island of Thrinacia, they would all die and their ship would be destroyed. Next, Odysseus spoke to his mother, who had died after he didn't return home from the war. Anticlea warned him about the troubles that afflicted his home, about the suitors that were threatening to take his wife and kill his son. Other spirits of ancient heroes communed with Odysseus before the ship finally set sail again. Their journey was nearing its end, with the crew managing to avoid the land of the sirens, whose beautiful voices could lure sailors to their deaths. Odysseus ordered his men to stuff their ears with wax so that they would not be tempted. Yet, ever the good decision-maker, Odysseus longed to hear the song of the sirens. So he ordered his men to lash him to the mast and not untie him until they were well out of earshot. They passed through the Strait of Messina between the sea monsters, losing 6 men to the 6-headed Scylla. They then arrived on the island of Thrinacia, where Zeus had sent a great storm that wouldn't allow them to leave. Quickly going through their stores of food, the men quickly became hungry. If you remember, they were warned not to kill the livestock on this island. Odysseus set out a prayer to the gods, asking for aid in their journey. Despite his warnings, the men began to hunt the livestock on the island, bringing about the anger of the god Helios. Once they had set sail again, though, another great storm arose, destroying the ship and killing everyone on board except for Odysseus, who washed up on the shores of the island of Aegea. There, Odysseus met with the nymph Calypso, who fell in love with him. And using her singing voice, Calypso enchanted the hero, seducing him to become her lover. Odysseus remains on the island for 7 years, while Calypso wishes to make him her husband. But Odysseus turns down her offers of immortality, yearning for his wife as the years go on. Eventually, Athena seeks the aid of Zeus to order Odysseus freed from the island and to be allowed to continue his journey home. While Calypso is unhappy with this, she does free the warrior, giving him provisions for his journey in a raft. Seeing Odysseus once more on the seas, Poseidon, who likes to hold a grudge, wrecks the raft. Luckily, Odysseus is offered the aid of a sea nymph and washes ashore on the island of Scuria, home of the Phaeacians. Seeking the aid of the Phaeacians, Odysseus is told by King Alcinius that he will have him return to his home. That night, Odysseus takes part in their celebrations and hears stories of the Trojan War. When they find out who Odysseus really is and the role that he took in that war, they're overjoyed at having such a hero among them. Feeling welcomed, he begins to recount his journey since leaving the war so many years ago. Finally, Odysseus is returned to Ithaca, sneaking into the city under the cover of darkness. Disguised, he approaches a local and learns how things stand within his city. It wasn't the best of situations. When he did not return from the war, it was believed that he had died. 108 suitors arrived in his home, with their goal being to pursue Penelope's hand in marriage. His son Telemachus was urged by Athena to seek out his father. Taking a ship, Telemachus sought out those who served with his father during the war, and then he learned about some of his father's adventures and how he had been last heard trapped at Calypso's island. That night, Telemachus returned home and he meets the disguised father. Revealing himself to his son, they both devise a plan that would kill the would-be suitors. Once again, Athena comes down to aid Odysseus and his family. At her advice, Penelope holds a competition the next day, offering her hand to whoever is strong enough to use Odysseus' bow to shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads. Only Odysseus is strong enough, and upon revealing himself, he slays every suitor. It's not exactly a hero's ending, because after this, he goes on to kill any of their servants who aided the suitors during his absence. The people of Ithaca are outraged, and they plan to kill Odysseus and his family for the deaths of their sons and daughters. Only in the end, when Athena reveals herself once more, does the cycle of bloodshed end. And so ends the journey of Odysseus and his Odyssey. If you enjoy this myth, and you enjoy these myths that we are telling you here, even if we are butchering some of the names and the words in these older myths, then please let us know in the comments down below. Let us know what you find interesting about the Odyssey and Odysseus' journey. Let us know what you want us to cover next right here at Tales of Earth. And don't forget, give this video a like, and you can follow us on Twitter at Tales of Earth if you want to talk to us directly and find out some interesting smaller tidbits about the world around you.